Hi, we're Chelsea and Tony, and today we're going to be reviewing the Pentax K-S2, the Canon T6i, the Nikon D5500, the Canon T6s, and the Canon 70D.
Three of those cameras are brand new. The Pentax K-S2 is our first Pentax, and then we've got two new Canons, the T6i and the T6s. They have a brand new 24 megapixel sensor, the first from Canon. So we're gonna see how that new sensor compares to the old and the 70D, and if it can finally hang with the Nikon sensors.
We're going to be putting them all through a battery of tests, testing their focus tracking, their image quality, their shadow recovery, their sharpness.
Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Up first, image quality. We're at f8, 1/60th of a second. We're gonna take pictures of the mansion here so we can zoom in and check the details and see how the shadow recovery goes. With the Adobe standard RAW processing, the colors came out very different on the Pentax and Nikon than the three Canons. The Canon colors are actually more true to the scene. Either way, if you're not happy with the colors from one of the cameras, it's easy to automatically fix them when you import the pictures into Lightroom. Even though the lighting didn't change, the exposures on the cameras vary a bit. We used each system's native 50mm lenses, which have slightly different t-stop ratings, allowing slightly different amounts of light in at the same f-stop number. Also, ISO 100 isn't the same on different cameras, so my first step is to use the histogram to equalize the brightness. We couldn't detect any image quality difference between the T6i and T6s. The T6s doesn't cost more because it makes better pictures, it's more usable. Recovering the shadows reveals they have the same dynamic range. The 70D is 20 megapixels, while the T6i and T6s are 24 megapixels. To test if the extra 20% pixels are able to extract more detail, we scaled up the 70D images to 24 megapixels. In this real-world comparison with the reasonably sharp Canon 50mm f1.4, we couldn't detect any more detail in the 24 megapixel images. In fact, the 70D's images actually seemed a little sharper. We retested with a 500mm f4 and also couldn't see any extra detail, so maybe those extra megapixels don't matter. To test the shadow noise and dynamic range, we raised the shadows and exposure on the RAW files and then scaled the T6i's images down to 20 megapixels. The newer T6i and T6s showed substantially cleaner recovered shadows, indicating improved dynamic range. Great job, Canon. Comparing the dynamic range of the new Canons to the Nikon D5500, the D5500 is very slightly better, but it's close. And that's great for Canon, who's traditionally been way behind Nikon in dynamic range. The Canon actually beat the Pentax for dynamic range, but the difference isn't significant. It's also interesting to know that the Pentax pictures were much more detailed. The K-S2 doesn't have an AA filter, which lets it get sharper results. Also, the $125 Pentax 50mm f1.8 just might be sharper than the $330 Canon 50mm f1.4. Now we're going to test the focus tracking of all of these cameras. We've got them on continuous focus, wide open with an 50mm f1.8 lens. See how many we can get in focus while they're walking towards us as a test of sports and kind of wildlife tracking. Shooting JPEG just so the buffering doesn't slow any of the cameras down. In this test, and a low-light test done with 70 to 200 lenses, every camera did good enough for casual sports and wildlife photography. Objectively, the T6i and T6s did just as well as the 70D, but both cameras require an extra button push to change the focusing points, and that will result in missed shots. We didn't have a 70 to 200 to test the Pentax with, but it was amazingly accurate with the 50mm f1.8, and we happily recommend it for sports photographers. Now I'm testing out the Movie Servo AAF, the focus tracking capabilities of each of the three cameras. The 70D has always been good at this. One of the differences between the T6i, this one, and the higher-end T6s is the ability to track moving subjects during recording. And so far, I gotta say, the T6i is not doing a good job. It's just not tracking her face, even though I have to repeatedly press the shutter to get it to refocus. Yeah, that's not good. So let's try the T6s. Okay, let's try that one more time. Okay, now let's see how the 70D does. The 70D and T6s both have video phase detect focusing systems. The 70D seem to track focus slightly better than the T6s, but either will give you good results for sports. The T6i, D5500, and K-S2 can change focus while recording, but it's slow and jerky, so you'll want to avoid it. Overall, we'll recommend either the T6s or 70D for serious videographers. Let's get out of here and go test out the Wi-Fi and summarize everything. So we spent like 3.5 hours today getting Wi-Fi set up on all the cameras. Let me tell you, initial setup is a nightmare. I'm not even going to talk about that. I only care about what it takes once it's set up the first time to get a single picture from the camera to Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter.
Okay.
Because we talk about Wi-Fi like that's what we want, to connect the camera to Wi-Fi.
I do want that.
What you really want is to connect the camera to your social networks, right?
That's true.
Wi-Fi is just one way to connect.
Yeah, it's not like I'm going to browse the net on my...
That difference is important because these cameras all connect to Wi-Fi. But once you get to that Wi-Fi, it's real hard to do anything useful. So I set up a grading system.
Okay.
A, B, C, D, and F, just like in school. To get an A camera has to be able to connect through the internet and communicate directly to your social networks. So with a couple of taps.
That sounds like a dream.
Well, it's the way your phone works, right?
Right.
And that's the way most people share pictures now, is on their phone. So it's just setting that an A is operating just like everybody's smartphone.
Okay. A B is your camera connecting to Wi-Fi and then being able to connect to the social network.
Yeah, and that does take an extra beat because you have to set up the Wi-Fi, turn on Wi-Fi, set up a connection to a Wi-Fi network, and it even takes a couple of minutes once you introduce that extra step.
Really?
Yeah, it takes a little bit to get Wi-Fi fired up. You have to type in the little password on the screen, and they get to see if you have to pull your smartphone out of your pocket and launch some kind of app. But if it all goes smoothly, I'll give them a C. If you can pretty much open the app up and then put it right on Twitter or Instagram or whatever.
That seems fair.
Pretty reasonable. A D if it's a real pain. And let me say, what I mean is, if you have to open the app, save the picture from your camera to your smartphone, then like disconnect your phone from your camera and connect back to the internet and then re-upload it.
Is that what this little...
That's the way I feel, yeah.
Yeah, the stressed man.
Yeah, so you get a C if you can share it directly from the app, and you get a D if you have to open up some other app to do the sharing.
And an F is if you have to just connect it to a USB into your computer like you would anyway?
The old-fashioned way.
way.
Well, old-fashioned since film went away. So the Canon T6i and T6s and the 70D, all the Canons work basically the same. They all get a D, which is is this.
So it will work, but it's frustrating.
Right.
How long did that take for you? Like, was that a 1-minute process, a 5-minute process?
I think I'd be lucky to get a picture shared in under 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
It would take a while. Now, the Canons do offer the ability to post directly to Facebook or Twitter, but I had to disregard that. I didn't find it useful because they don't let you type a message. So when you post to Twitter, all it does is it shares a link to Canon's website. You don't see the thumbnail or anything in the Twitter feed. You can't type a message about it.
You can't say, this link is to my picture.
Yeah, you can't say having fun
link
in Florida or whatever. It's just a link that nobody will click on because there's no thumbnail. It's useless. And the same thing with Facebook. It will embed the picture in Facebook, but you can't type a message or tag people. So it's a really primitive
Especially
thing.
with Twitter, it's not like you could go back on your phone, edit the post, and then say, this link is to this. You can't even edit your posts on Twitter.
Right.
So you would just be like...
So the only way I found it useful was to launch the Canon app, copy it over. It has the ability to connect to, well, it's a real pain.
Okay.
It takes a long time. The Nikon was similar, but slightly less of a pain.
So,
the app worked a little more smoothly.
I thought the Nikon, you had to connect to your camera, upload the picture, disconnect from your camera, and then get it on your phone.
Yes, that's the case with all of these. The camera basically sets up a little wireless access point. So you have to go into your phone, connect to Wi-Fi, find the camera's wireless access point, type in the security code that the camera is showing you to get to the wireless access point, launch the app, and the app will then recognize the camera. Then you can pick your pictures, transfer them to your phone. Then you have to close that app. None of these cameras support sharing directly from the app. The Samsung app does. So you close that camera model specific app, open up your photo gallery on your phone, and then from there you can actually share it. What did I mention? You have to disconnect from your camera? Because once your phone's connected to your camera, you can't reach the internet. So you have to disconnect that Wi-Fi, and then you can actually share. It's who does that? No. Nobody does this.
Well,
you don't take a picture of your tapas.
Yeah.
And you want to share them when you're at the Spanish restaurant on Instagram.
You're in the restaurant just taking like 5 minutes to share your picture.
Maybe if you're back at the hotel and you really want to share some pictures and you have some time and you don't want to bring a whole computer, but it's not spontaneous.
No.
And it's not fun either.
It's not fun.
No.
Is that why you give it a D, C, and a D? Not fun.
Yeah, the Pentax was even worse. It got a D- because you cannot, from the app on the Android at least, you can't save the pictures to the phone. You can save them in the app itself, but you can't share it from within the app. So it will.
Could you take a screenshot?
You could, but you can't turn the phone horizontally. You have to hold it vertically so the picture's like really small on your screen. They don't even let you turn the phone horizontally. How ridiculous. The apps are terrible on all of them.
So it sounds like
really
this is like
stuff.
We're still building off of this idea. It's not quite practical yet.
Yeah, I wanted to start grading Wi-Fi because I want camera manufacturers to put some importance on how smoothly the software works, because one of the reasons I believe camera sales are dropping is that it's so much easier to be social with pictures taken with your phone.
Yeah.
I believe cameras will start to pick up if we make it easier to be social with them, because then people can take great pictures and share them immediately, and that's very important to modern photographers.
Yeah.
None of these cameras make that easy or fun. You just don't do it. Exposure compensation is kind of a big deal because you adjust exposure compensation all the time, right? Mm-hmm. If your picture's a little dark, you crank it up. If your picture's too bright, you crank it down. 2 of these cameras require an extra button push to adjust the exposure compensation.
And that's the 2 Canons, right?
Well, the Canon T6i and the Nikon D5500.
Oh, right.
So one of the differences between the T6i and the T6s is the T6s adds a dedicated exposure compensation dial. With the T6i, you have to push the plus-minus button and then adjust the main dial. Same thing with the D5500. It's not a big deal. It just requires a little extra coordination. It slows you down a little bit. So if you're snapping pictures, if you're a serious photographer and you're trying to move quickly, it just slows you down.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring that up. The other cameras have more superior controls. Changing focusing points is about the controls too.
This one is more important to me than the exposure compensation because I do that often. If I'm shooting a portrait shoot, sometimes I want it in landscape, sometimes I want it horizontally.
Yeah, or the person turns their head a little bit and you need to focus on the nearest eye.
And I'd like to do it fast. I don't want to have multiple buttons. It's something that I want immediately.
Right. So all the cameras allow you to adjust the focusing point with a little either directional pad or like a dedicated stick on the 70D. But the new T6s, the T6i and the T6s, require you to push the focus point selection button and then use the directional pad.
So one extra step.
One extra step. Sounds like nothing, but shooting my daughter's soccer game with him, it meant I missed shots. Because I'd be trying to use the rule of thirds and the rule of space and have like the subject over on the left side.
There's that one extra beat.
Yeah, and suddenly it's coming in from the right. They change directions, which happens instantly in soccer.
Right.
You have to hit that button, scroll, and then go back to shooting.
And you could miss the action in that time.
Yeah.
So for some people that will be important. For other people, maybe they won't care.
Yeah, if you're not shooting action, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah. The touch screen. I feel like this is the type of thing where you either want it or you don't. You either like it or you don't.
Yeah, I feel like most of our audience does not care about the touchscreen.
I like the touchscreen.
I like it too.
I actually thought I didn't care about the touchscreen, and then I used the touchscreen camera for a while, and it was so nice to just pinch to zoom.
Yep, and you find yourself flipping through the pictures.
You can flip through your pictures really easily.
But I also think it's important because every new photographer who gets a camera, when you hand a new camera to somebody, the first thing they do is they touch the screen, whether or not it's a touchscreen. Because people think everything's a touchscreen. They expect it to be because we're all trained on phones.
Yeah.
So they all have touchscreens except for the Pentax K-S2, which does not have a touchscreen.
Just an interesting thing about that, I showed a touchscreen to my grandfather who's like 90 years old and he's never used an iPhone or anything. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he used it and knew how to use it, it wasn't amazing anymore. It was just like, this is what things do now. Yeah. So it seems ridiculous to be that picky about technology, but we acclimated to it almost instantly. And I know people are going to say, like, who cares about a touchscreen? But it won't matter. That is the future. We know that that's possible now, so why not?
Yeah, everything's a touchscreen now. It seems really primitive when cameras don't have touchscreens.
Yeah. I thought he'd be blown away. Like, you can touch a screen. He was like, yeah, it does that. I'm 90. I don't care.
Yeah, we habituate him instantly, don't we?
He was like, oh, yeah, I can do that now.
So we wanted to hand out a few awards for different types of categories, because there's not one winner. It depends on the type of photographer you are,
Yeah.
the style of photography. So for the casual photographer, like your mom, or like your neighbor, the person who has a new baby and they want to take pictures of it, I wanted to recommend either the Nikon D5500 or the Canon T6i. They both come in at the lower end of the price range. They don't have like dedicated exposure compensation buttons, but these users won't be adjusting the exposure compensation. They'll be using all automatic settings.
Maybe, yeah.
We couldn't recommend the Canon T5i because the previous generation Canons had an awful sensor that was incredibly outdated. But the new Canon sensor proved worthy. It looks great. And we, even from the casual photographers, I heard complaints saying, why are my pictures so noisy? And they didn't understand what was going on, but they knew they didn't like the pictures.
They knew something wasn't right. Yeah.
So Canon fixed that, and congratulations. That's a big, big step forward. We can now recommend them to the casual photographers.
The serious beginner.
I will say I didn't recommend the Pentax only because of the lack of the touchscreen. I think that's important to the casual photographer.
Oh, okay, so it's still a contender, but just maybe. All right, I see what you did. You cut it out. Serious beginner. Now, how do you classify a serious beginner? Someone that wants to get more invested in photography, wants to buy more lenses? Yeah,
they want to learn it. They want to be making adjustments to the exposure compensation and changing modes and probably changing focusing points.
That's actually a really good distinction, because I get some people that will go out and spend a couple $1,000s on camera gear, and people have literally said to me, can you come over and set my settings so I can take good pictures?
Mm-hmm.
They just want to put it on automatic mode and not have to think about it. And other people will say, teach me how to do this or teach me how to do that. So I like that you made that distinction.
The serious beginners begin to care about the buttons and dials. They begin to care about the lenses they can get in the future, how easily they can change settings. I think the Pentax K-S2 is amazing in this regard.
Yeah.
It's got in-body image stabilization. It will move the sensor around so any lens is stabilized. I found the controls to be just great. It's got a dedicated exposure compensation dial. You can move the focusing points around with the directional pad without pushing an extra button. It's incredibly customizable. You can make it do just about anything.
You know what else I think is really nice about it?
What's that?
It's good for sports photography.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the serious beginners that I have met want to take pictures of their kids playing sports.
Yeah, sports is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get the same lenses for it as Canon and Nikon. Like all the Sigma and Tamron lenses are pretty much available. And it's also a little bit sharper because it doesn't have that anti-aliasing filter. And it was the cheapest of the bunch.
Wow.
So
really
that's my main winner.
Pentax.
Yeah, I was really impressed with it. It's our first Pentax to review, but I was really blown away. It's a great, great value, and I can't not recommend it. I also put the D5500 up there, though it occurs to me that it doesn't have the dedicated exposure compensation dial, but overall, it's still a great camera, fantastic image quality and dynamic range, and of course the full Nikon range of lenses and such. For travel photography, I think weight is really important here.
Yeah.
The D5500 is definitely the lightest, but I also want to tell people to take a look at mirrorless cameras in general.
I do like the Sonys.
Yeah, I put up a picture of the Sony Alpha 5100 touchscreen, super light and small, but the same image quality as the D5500 in a smaller package. But also take a look at like the Olympuses, like the EM5 Mark II, the EM10, small, lightweight, attractive. You'll be much happier carrying them around when you're walking through European cities or hiking or whatever.
I do like them better for travel.
Yeah, and you're probably not doing sports or anything while you're traveling. Static subjects and such.
Yeah.
For video.
Video.
Yeah, two of the Canons have phase detect video focusing, so they can track moving subjects while you're recording. And that makes a huge difference. Because if you don't have that, then the focusing is all jerky and kind of useless. The T6s and the Canon 70D win in that regard. We found the 70D to do a better job of tracking focus. Pick up a used copy because they're extremely durable and the used copies are going to be just fine. But I also want to, again, point people to mirrorless cameras. Specifically in this price range, the Panasonic G7 was just announced. It has full 4K video. So it records 4 times more pixels than any of these cameras will. And even if you're watching it on your 1080 TV now, at some point you're going to get a 4K monitor or tablet or TV or something, and hopefully your videos will last a while. If you're editing your videos, it means you can crop and pan and zoom in post without losing any sharpness. We've switched to GH4s and A7s and 4K, and it's made all the difference. And really, if you're into video, go 4K and you'll love it. For sports, autofocusing and the ability to change focusing points rapidly is really important.
That is important.
The Pentax did great at this. Get a nice 70-200 f2.8 for it, as well as the Canon 70D. I also want to bring up a used Canon 70, the original one. They're a great value. They go for about $600 used. It gets more frames per second, and it has a fantastic focusing system. The image quality isn't quite up to these more modern cameras, but it's close, and it's extremely fast and durable. Great camera.
Wildlife. 70 and 70D.
Yeah, and those have been our mainstays for a long time. The APS-C sensor works great. I limited it to the two Canon cameras with great focusing systems and the ability to change focusing points with the little directional pad.
Right. They also come with an affordable great wildlife lens, which is the Canon 400mm lens.
Yeah. It goes for about $1,000 used or about $1,300 new. Watch our reviews that include it, but it's such an important lens because Pentax and Nikon don't have anything like that. You'd have to spend $2,500, $3,000 to get similar image quality.
Yeah.
So for wildlife beginners, that's really important.
Handheld low-light, the Pentax K-S2, because of that in-body image stabilization, right?
Right. That means you can use it with any fast prime. And I also specifically want to recommend the Sigma 18-35 f1.8 zoom lens, an incredibly fast zoom lens. It's incredibly sharp. It's one weakness, no image stabilization. But slap it on that Pentax and you have stabilized lens. And with that combination, we've handheld shots at like half a second. Still live shots. But so you can be in near darkness and get beautiful shots with this combination. This lens goes for about $900 new. So it's more than the body. But it will be just about unbeatable in that price range. So take a serious look at that Pentax. Let's plug some stuff.
We have a general photography book, we have a Lightroom book, and a gear buying guide.
These are all video books, so it's not just a boring book. They include videos. In fact, SDP
comes with 100 videos, over 12 hours of video. This comes with 14 hours of video. This comes with 16 hours of video, and they all include access to a private group where you can put up your pictures. People will critique them or give you feedback or help you, give you advice, whatever. Great groups.
Get them all at sdp.io/store or just at Amazon, but you don't have to buy anything. If you just want more free videos, click subscribe and share this with your friends. We hope that we helped you. And you can help us out a little bit if you decide to buy one of these cameras. Go into the description, use the links down there to buy the cameras, and we'll get a few pennies out of every dollar. Helps us support us.